Hey everybody, Aaron from Beansprout here. I'm gonna do something a little different today. Instead of showing an instrument I built, I'm gonna show an instrument, an antique instrument that's on loan to me from a customer. So the story behind this goes that I was delivering an instrument to a customer who's local, and I saw this hanging on the wall and knew what it is, and I asked him if I could borrow it. And I've had it about a month now and done a little bit of study and research about it, and I thought I'd share it with you today. So yeah, the first three original canonical ukulele builders, they came from Madeira, an island off of Portugal, and they came to the Hawaiian Islands in 1879 as agricultural laborers. That's what paid their ticket to get there. Once they finished that labor, they could go open up shop. So they opened up shop, each of them as cabinet makers, but also as guitar and instrument makers as well. And the three original gentlemen, their last names are Diaz, Santos, and Nunes, and this is Nunes' son instrument. He opened up shop with his two sons around 1909, and it went till 1918 when the business closed. So this instrument is not one of the first instruments made in the 1880s or early 1900s. It's one that came out of his shop with his sons. So at that time, the shop was probably had more than just his sons as craftsmen, and they were putting out a lot of instruments of this grade for export and as tourist items. So I think this is probably from between 1915 and 1918. I can tell this one's for export because the label inside mentions the Southern California Music Company. That was a Los Angeles firm that imported and sold lots of instruments from the islands. And up above that, there is a brand in the back that we call a taboo stamp, a TABU stamp. And that is a mark that shows that this authentically comes from the islands and is not a fake. At the time, ukuleles were so popular around the world that lots of people were making them and claiming them to be Hawaiian, when the stamp inside shows that it truly is. So it's kind of like the difference between champagne and sparkling wine. So this instrument is called, would have been a Style 1 Nunes and Sons ukulele. It probably cost $10 around 1915 to 1918. The whole thing is made of Hawaiian koa, except for the bracing and this inlaid marquetry around the sound hole, the rosette. This marquetry also you'll see on fancier models, you'll see as binding, you'll see it on the fretboards, you'll see it even come down the middle on some makers' instruments. This would have been like off-the-shelf marquetry available to any kind of woodworker from catalogs. So you might see it inlaid into boxes or tables or whatever. This one being a Style 1, it's not the fanciest instrument, so the top, back, and sides are actually made from flat sawn plain koa. And sometimes, because these are made of flat sawn wood, they go warpy and get pretty twisted over time. This one has a bit of that going on, but it's not terrible. Basically what happens is the bridge starts to go this way, the sound hole sinks, the neck starts to come up, and this one actually has a little twist to the neck as well. The neck's made of nicer stuff, got a little curl to it. You can see the interesting shape here. It's definitely hand carved. And the frets are sunk directly into the neck, no overlaid fretboard. By this time, the original instruments made by those first three makers really did reflect some of their values of the old world craftsmanship. So they had softwood tops, fancy mustache bridges, overlaid fingerboards with decorative carving. But by this time, it's all Hawaiian koa, and it's really a Hawaiian instrument by this time. Koa has importance on the islands, patriotically and politically, as well as spiritually. So it would have been seen as a royal wood. So by this time, especially making for export, these guys are cranking out tons of these basic ukes. This is pretty similar to what you'd see from other makers at the time for export, whether it's Kumale or somebody else. You can see on the label there, it claims that he is the founder or the inventor of the ukulele. He could claim that by this time because the other two gentlemen had already passed away. But it really was a group effort. Many shops around this era coming together to create what we now call an ukulele. So a couple of things about condition. I think this one's been refinished with a brush on like shellac. I can see the brush marks, and it's a thicker finish than I've seen on other original instruments. The spruce braces start to push through and crack the sides over time, and that's what's going on with this one, but it's not terrible. The action is pretty high, the string action here, but it is playable, especially within the first few frets. These white plastic pegs would have been original to the instrument. That's what they, that's how they came out of the factory. I think it's celluloid plastic. That would have been a pretty fancy space age material at the time, so to speak, and used in lots of other guitar and other luthery jobs. Yeah, so. Oh, also, this instrument would have been made in what we now call the Spanish style construction, where the neck has a block that extends past here, and there's sawn kerfs in there, and the sides get tucked into there, and then the top and back get glued on. That is contrary to like how they would make it on the mainland, maybe, where the instruments, the body's made by itself, and then a mortise is cut, and then the neck has a tenon cut in the end of it, and they made them together. And I can see on the instrument plenty of chisel, saw, and knife marks. This is definitely a handmade item. There's almost nothing on it that's symmetrical. All of it's a little twisty and warpy. If you look right here, this is pretty obviously not symmetrical, and I can see the knife marks. So I'm sure that this was cut just like this, which is pretty fun to look at. It probably was built either on a solera, which is like a little work board that might have had pegs around it to hold the curved shape, or it might have been built like almost freehand, with just it, held together with wrapped around. Instead of clamps, it might have even been wrapped around with string to hold it all together. So yeah, it's pretty fun. How about a little tune on it? Pretty fun. I had a good time looking at this. Thanks to Bill for letting me hold on to it for a month or so. Yeah, and in the description below, I'll put some resources if you guys want to read more about this sort of thing, if you're interested in it, where you can go to read about it too. And thanks for tuning in. Cheers.